23rd of September 1997 and Pop 001 is making its final approach into Sarajevo International Airport. Tonight's concert will be the 56th on U2's Pop Mart World Tour, but even by the standards of a show that includes the world's largest TV screen and a 40-foot-high mirror ball lemon, tonight's date will be an unusual one. The rest of the Pop Mart Tour was organised in 1997, but this show was arranged before then. 4 years before, on the evening of July the 3rd, 1993. We need to understand what was going on back then.
Thank you for joining us live on the air.
My pleasure.
The band were in the middle of the Europa leg of the Zoo TV tour, a hyperactive assault of a rock show that had seen U2 completely reinvent themselves, seeming to wave goodbye to the worthy but worried foursome that had conquered the world with a bare stage, 3 chords and a truth. The U2 that strutted in front of the giant screens of Zoo TV was a very different animal. The message, however well disguised, was the same, but the medium was different. This was the 90s, the age of CNN, the news live and on call 24/7. Watch me, the channel yelled out, I'll tell you things all day. But in a world of 24-hour news coverage, it quietly came to pass that the news needed to be more than just news. The news also had to be entertainment, and if it wasn't entertaining, it could not by definition be news at all. But at least there was lots of it. Total media overload, in fact. And this was the world of first Zoo TV and then Europa set out to surf and channel hop. This was the great contradiction at whose heart the band sat, holding up a mirror to it all, smiling and pointing, but definitely not preaching. And then along came Bill Carter.
Here is my whole heart to you. I love Sarajevo.
No.
Bill Carter was an American aid worker in the besieged city of Sarajevo. By mid-1993, the siege of Sarajevo, in fact the whole awfulness of the fracture of Yugoslavia, was no longer making the news. Out of sight, being out of mind, terrible atrocities were happening on a daily basis when the rest of the world stood idly by.
I don't like the looks of this one.
We didn't know about them. How could we care? With no great mission in mind other than to maybe convince the band to tape a message of support to bring back to his Bosnian friends, Bill smuggled himself out of Sarajevo and, far more impressively, into the band's enclosure backstage in Verona. As a result of that short meeting, Zoo TV, the television station that didn't broadcast, got decidedly and uncomfortably real.
It's obscene that we have to beam you into a rock and roll show, and that in with our fantasy of Zoo TV, we'll have your reality.
None of this had any place in the middle of a rock show, but the band reasoned if they didn't put it there, where would it go? If they didn't show it, who would? The broadcast from Sarajevo, ordinary people given a voice by Bill and the band, lasted from Bologna through to Wembley, and while the messages were by times moving,
Mia cara Mirica.
and by times awful,
What do you really do for us? Excuse me, I think nothing.
they were always awkward and the show always suffered.
2 years ago, we were living like old teenagers, listening to music, going out. We have schools, friends, plans for the future. Now, we have shells, we have screams of children. Our schools are burned down. We'll never see many of our friends. They are gone forever.
After 18 months of glorious irony, the critics were delighted to point out that at the first opportunity the band had jumped back up on that soapbox and started to preach.
Goodbye, Sarajevo.
But it made the news that the silence was broken.
I can't believe we managed to pull it off. I don't even believe it.
It was, and still is, hard to comprehend how far into the abyss Sarajevo had fallen. It's worth remembering that only a few short years before, Sarajevo had been the centre of international attention for entirely different reasons. In 1984, Sarajevo had hosted the Winter Olympics. In fact, the catering for the Pop Mart crew was set up in a bullet-riddled building where Torval and Dean and Ravel's Bolero had taken a figure skating gold medal. But that was then.
You know, the fact that we can come and put on not just a concert, but the same concert that we put on in Paris, New York and London, I think is maybe a symbol for the people of Sarajevo that things are getting back to normal.
One of the stories Bill had passed on that night in Verona had centred around a remarkable event that had taken place in Sarajevo a short time before. In amongst the incoming artillery and sniper fire, the citizens decided, with an audacity that is still staggering, to hold a beauty contest. In the middle of a raging hurricane, they created an eye of Cannes and then winked it at the world. That beauty pageant will be the centrepiece of and provide the title for Bill Carter's award-winning documentary, Miss Sarajevo. Produced by Bono, the documentary is a time slice of life in the embattled city at the height of the war, rejoicing in the people's quest for normality and humanity in the most utterly inhuman of surroundings. It's a remarkable piece of work. But the muse that was Miss Sarajevo wasn't done yet. In their post-Zoo TV guise as members of the transient group Passengers, the band, Brian Eno and the maestro Pavarotti presented to the world a truly heartbreaking love song, also called Miss Sarajevo. The song was given its first public airing at Pavarotti's War Child concert in Modena, and the video for the song again drew in the hypnotic imagery of that moment of beauty in a sea of insanity. Obviously, our story doesn't end in Modena. Backstage that night in Verona, a promise had been made. The band had said they would play Sarajevo. Indeed, they had tried to organise it there and then. That hadn't happened. But the promise had not been made idly. 4 years later, the pop-mart circus rolled into town.
Well, that was nice and relaxing.
Relaxing?
So we've never been greeted off by 100 troops before. But yes, nothing in Sarajevo is normal.
The fact that they want to honor a rock band is very mad to me. I mean, I would have thought it's the last thing they want. I mean, we have to do a benefit gig, we have to come here, do a scratch gig. No, they wanted the whole 9 yards, they wanted the 40-foot lemon, they wanted the drive-in movie, they wanted the full Pop Mart stage, so then we had to figure out how to get all that stuff here.
Maybe not even the band fully realised how many people were involved in fulfilling their promise. As well as the truckers and riggers and roadies, there was a veritable army made up of promoters, UN workers, politicians, policemen, ordinary Sarajevans, and even soldiers. Airports and roads were opened, checkpoints manned and guarded, barriers lifted, ceasefires established, safe passage guaranteed. Favours were called in, arms were twisted. Nobody underestimated the importance of this event happening.
I mean, just to drive through the city, and you can't tell actually what these people have been through. During the war, people had to spend their nights in shelters listening to deafening rock and roll music to drown out the sounds of the shells and the mortars falling over their heads. I guess, U2 was part of that noise. There's a connection there. It's hard to be honest with you to figure out what's happening here. Even to talk about it can demean it.
Do you remember the songs, man? Is there a time for keeping your head down? A time to turn your eyes away? Is there a time? Yeah, time for first communion time.
I hope you appreciate what you're seeing here. In the back of a car, driving through the re-emerging city of Sarajevo, flanked on either side by one half of the band that wrote a song about her exploits, sits Ivana Sirovic.
Here she comes.
Miss Sarajevo. The Miss Sarajevo. The girl who played the clown and took her crown. The girl that asked us not to let them kill her. And they're singing Miss Sarajevo, naturally.
Trova la via al mare, che come fiume giungerai a me, oltre I confini, Eso te recitate. Dole confini. L'amor giungerà. The trams are beautiful, are they?
Yeah, definitely.
This concert's about a return to normal life. That's what they want. And they don't want a patronage, they don't want a pity. They don't want us to kiss their ass, they want us to kick their ass.
And so on September the 23rd, 1997, U2, Golden Arch, drive-in movie, 40-foot lemon and all, finally got to play Sarajevo. And by request, it wasn't a benefit gig. 45,000 screaming Sarajevans stumped up for the privilege of yelling themselves as hoarse as the vocalist. Actually, they weren't all from Sarajevo. They came from the Spara field of Croatia and Serbia, Montenegro and Macedonia, Slovenia and Yugoslavia. But for one night at least, they all came from Sarajevo.